Good evening. I'm Dan Jennings, and this is your Blue Wave Report for May 8th, 2019. Tonight on the report, the war on women's health care. Lawmakers in 15 states have introduced heartbeat bans this session, and 4 states have passed the near total abortion ban: Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Ohio. The measures in Kentucky and Mississippi are already facing legal challenges, and similar bans have been blocked in Arkansas, Iowa, and North Dakota. In Alabama, by a 74-3 vote, Republicans in the state House last Tuesday passed HB 314, which would make abortion and attempted abortion felony offenses, except in cases in which it is necessary to prevent a serious health risk to the pregnant person. The Human Life Protection Act would make abortion a Class A felony punishable by 10 years to life in prison. An attempted abortion would be a Class C felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Republican lawmakers tabled an amendment offered by House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels that would have provided an exception for pregnancies that are the result of rape or incest. Nearly all Democratic House members walked out in protest before the vote. The measure now has a hearing scheduled with the state Senate Judiciary Committee on May 8th. In Georgia, Republican Governor Brian Kemp signed HB 481 last Tuesday, a measure that bans most abortions in the state. The Living Infant Fairness and Equality, or LIFE Act, prohibits abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected, effectively banning abortion as early as 6 weeks. The measure, which was passed by the Georgia General Assembly in March, includes exceptions for medical emergencies and pregnancies that are the result of rape or incest. HB 481 requires any abortion after the first trimester be performed in a licensed hospital, a licensed ambulatory surgical center, or a licensed abortion facility, and says that only a licensed physician may perform an abortion. The law contains a fetal personhood provision that defines a natural person to mean any human being, including an unborn child, raising concerns that fetal rights will be placed above the rights of a pregnant person. The most startling effect of this bill may be its criminalization of women who seek out abortions or terminate their own pregnancies. An earlier Georgia law imposing criminal penalties for illegal abortions did not apply to women who self-terminate. The new measure, by contrast, conspicuously lacks such a limitation. It can and would be used to prosecute women. Misoprostol, a drug that treats stomach ulcers but also induces abortions, is extremely easy to obtain, and American women routinely use it to self-terminate. This would now be illegal under Georgia law. Anti-abortion advocates generally insist that they do not want to punish women who undergo abortions, but HB 481 does precisely that. Once it takes effect, a woman who self-terminates will have, as a matter of law, killed a human, thereby committing murder. The penalty for that crime in Georgia is life imprisonment or capital punishment. So, yeah. HB 481 would also have consequences for women who get abortions from doctors or miscarry. A woman who seeks out an abortion from a healthcare provider would be a party to murder and thus subject to life in prison. And a woman who miscarries because of her own conduct, say using drugs while pregnant, would be liable for second-degree murder, punishable by 10 to 30 years in prison. Prosecutors may wind up interrogating women who miscarry to determine whether they can be held responsible, and if they find evidence of culpability, they may charge, detain, and try these women for the death of their fetuses. Every woman who seeks lawful abortions, even women, who seek lawful abortions out of state may not escape punishment. If a Georgia resident plans to travel elsewhere to obtain an abortion, she may be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, punishable by 10 years imprisonment. Also unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause. An individual who helps a woman plan her trip to get an out-of-state abortion or transports her to the clinic may also be charged with conspiracy. Also, again, unconstitutional. These individuals, after all, are conspiring to end the life of a person with full recognition under the new Georgia law. In Louisiana, the state Senate on Monday passed SB 184, which would prohibit a person from performing an abortion when a fetal heartbeat has been detected. The near-total abortion ban includes exceptions for when it's necessary to prevent the death or serious injury of the pregnant person. A physician who performs or induces an abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected would then have their medical license revoked, be fined up to $1,000, and face up to 2 years in prison. The ban would not apply to abortions performed when a pregnancy is diagnosed as medically futile. Six Democratic lawmakers joined the Republicans to pass this measure. They were Regina Barrow from Baton Rouge, Gerald Boudreaux from Lafayette, Eric LaFleur from Ville Platte, John Milkovich from Shreveport, Gregory Tarver, also from Shreveport, and Francis Thompson from Delhi. Let's vote them out, people. The State Senate Judiciary Committee last week amended the bill so that it would only take effect if a similar measure in Mississippi is upheld by the courts, a change the bill's sponsor, Senator John Milkovich, objected to. During the hearing, Milkovich invited anti-choice activists to speak, including Jennifer McCoy, who served time for trying to burn down abortion clinics in Virginia in the 90s. McCoy has also been linked to Scott Roeder, who murdered Wichita abortion provider George Tiller. The measure now heads to the State House. In Montana, Democratic Governor Steve Bullock on Friday vetoed a measure that would have required abortion providers to inform patients of the opportunity to view ultrasound images of the fetus and listen to the fetal heart tone prior to an abortion. Bullock has two other anti-choice measures waiting for his signature, a measure banning abortion at 20 weeks and a measure that would make it a felony to deny medically appropriate and reasonable medical care to infants born after a failed abortion. The governor hasn't indicated whether he will sign either measure, but he did veto the 20-week ban back in 2017. In North Carolina, the state Senate last Tuesday voted to override Democratic Governor Roy Cooper's veto of SB 359, the so-called Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Under SB 359, a healthcare practitioner who fails to provide the appropriate degree of care to a child born alive would face felony charges. Born alive measures are based on the myth that doctors murder children who were born alive after failed abortions. Contrary to the repeated lies from the anti-abortion groups, lawmakers such as Vice President Pence, and even the president, this type of legislation only serves to provoke violence against abortion providers. In his veto message, Cooper highlighted how unnecessary the legislation is. Laws already protect newborn babies, and this bill is an unnecessary interference between doctors and their patients. This needless legislation would criminalize doctors and other healthcare providers for a practice that simply does not exist. North Carolina Republicans lost their veto-proof supermajority in the General Assembly in last year's midterm elections, and unlike regular votes, veto overrides require a 60% supermajority. Democratic State Senator Don Davis from Pitt County joined Republicans to override the veto. Get him out too. Based on previous votes, it looks like Republicans in the State House will not have enough votes for an override, although there's a slight chance, so please call your member. An override vote in the State House has been delayed 3 times in the past week, and the latest vote was scheduled for May 7th. We do not know the outcome of that vote as of yet. Texas, the GOP-held state Senate on Friday passed SB 2243, which would require pregnant people to receive counseling prior to an abortion. Except during a medical emergency and prior to the performance of an abortion, a physician would be required to certify that the pregnant person received pre-abortion counseling. The counselor would need to be approved by the state and could not be employed by, contracted with, or have an interest in an abortion facility. Opponents of the measure fear pregnant people would be forced to obtain counseling at crisis pregnancy centers, also known as anti-choice clinics, that routinely use scare tactics and dispense false information about abortion. State Senator Jose Menendez out of San Antonio added provision requiring counselors to provide the certification within 1 day or as soon as practical after the appointment. He needs to go. His other amendment, which would have required counselors to be licensed healthcare professionals, was voted down. State Senator Judah Zaffirini in Laredo joined Republicans to pass the measure in a 20-7 vote, and the bill is pending in the State House. Let's get her out of there too, people. The State House Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence Committee on Monday advanced HB 3605, which would require the state to provide lawyers to represent fetuses in some court proceedings. The bill would permit a court to appoint an attorney to represent a fetus or embryo should a pregnant minor wish to waive the state parental consent requirements by petitioning a local court. So if their parents don't know, the fetus gets a lawyer. The measure is similar to a 2014 Alabama law that was later blocked in federal court. The bill would require the state attorney general to develop and maintain a registry for qualified attorneys who voluntarily notified the state of their willingness to serve or have been asked and have consented to serve as attorneys for an unborn child in judicial bypass proceedings. This isn't the first time Republicans in Texas have attempted to pass such legislation. Similar measures were introduced in 2015 and 2017 that would have required the state to appoint attorneys for the fetuses of brain-dead pregnant people. Both attempts failed. The measure now heads to the full state house for consideration. And finally, the best of them all so far, in Ohio. Less than a month ago, Ohio lawmakers passed and Governor Mike DeWine signed the heartbeat law that again bans abortion as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy, the point at which a fetal heartbeat can be detected. But apparently for Ohio Republicans, that just doesn't quite go far enough. A new Ohio bill would ban most private insurance coverage for abortions. Well, why would you need that if they were illegal after 6 weeks anyway? Opponents say it would also ban effective methods of birth control. 1/5 of representatives in the House, all Republicans, have signed on to House Bill 182, sponsored by State Representative John Becker out of Union Township, that would prohibit most insurance companies from offering coverage for abortion services. Again, if it's illegal, there isn't going to be any. The intent is to save lives and reduce the cost of employers and employees' health care insurance, Becker says. The bill would ban non-therapeutic abortions that includes, here it is, drugs or devices used to prevent the implantation of a fertilized ovum, otherwise known as birth control devices. Becker says the bill also speaks to the coverage of ectopic or tubal pregnancies where the fertilized egg attaches outside the womb. And here's the wonderful part. Part of that treatment, he says, would be removing the embryo from the fallopian tube and then reinserting it into the uterus so that it is defined as not an abortion. I'm sorry, it's laughable. And it's laughable because the treatment doesn't exist in the realm of ectopic pregnancy, says Jamie Miracle, Deputy Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio, and that you can't just reimplant. It's not a medical thing. She says under this bill, women would have to wait until their very lives were in danger to get an abortion in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, and that this bill would have grave impacts on Ohio's infant and maternity mortality rates. That's not all, Miracle says. She argues it will ban insurance from covering many popular methods of birth control, such as birth control pills, IUDs, and other methods of birth control that the bill states that any birth control could act to stop a fertilized egg from implanting in the uterus is considered an abortion under this bill. I bet you Viagra is covered, though. This bill just had its first hearing in an Ohio House committee. If it goes further, supporters, opponents, and medical professionals will have the opportunity to testify. Thank you to the following: Rewire News, slatenews.org, slate.com for information used in tonight's report on the war on women's health. For the Blue Wave Report, I'm Dan Jennings, reminding you:
don't just comment, act. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe.